If you want to make sure you never get burned while out on surveillance, then you need to make sure you never make these 10 rookie mistakes that get PIs made all of the time. The first rule of thumb is to make sure you never smoke in your car while on surveillance. I know there are not as many people who smoke today as there were back in the day when I got started as a PI. But for those that do smoke, or vape for that matter, it is something that will get you burned to be sure. People today notice things like the smoke or the vape rolling out of a cracked window, and they also notice the stains on the window from that smoke, not to mention that it makes getting quality video very difficult. Not to mention the big puffs of smoke inside your car and the smell, yes, the odor that comes out of it. Cigarette smoke and that fruity smell of your vape stick are very noticeable to everyone except the person who is smoking or vaping, and it will be noticed to be sure. And I speak from experience here, folks. When I first started out as a PI back in 2008, I was still a smoker. I quit soon after, but I noticed all of these challenges firsthand. I got burned often. My video was poor quality, and I lost opportunities to get video because I was busy lighting up or putting out a cigarette. This video is sponsored by OREP Insurance and Working PI Magazine. OREP is a leading provider of private investigator liability insurance. Visit orep.org for a quote today. Calling into police dispatch is another one that, while not as often as other things, will sometimes get you burned. I usually call myself in all of the time except under certain circumstances. If you are doing surveillance in a small town and you call that small town police department and let them know you are there doing surveillance, you may very well find out that everyone in that small town knows you are there. Everyone seems to know everyone in these little rural towns, and they like to gossip and talk and ponder about who the PI may be investigating and why. Not to mention, it seems that many times these small town cops just can't help themselves and drive by you just to make sure everything is okay. I know usually they're not doing anything to purposefully get you burned, but if the neighborhood sees them driving by all the time, they are going to assume something is up and start looking around for suspicious things themselves. Using your camera in plain view, like from the front seat, is another no-no while out on surveillance. This is a twofer, folks. Don't do surveillance from the front seat unless you absolutely have to, and if you do, make sure your camera is not visible when shooting video. I know myself that I can get very tunnel visioned when my subject goes active, and once I pull up the camera to get the video, I forget about what is going on around me. And sometimes, I hate to admit it, but sometimes my camera is right there in plain view for all to see if they look in my windshield. This ties in closely with nosy neighbors. You can usually pick these people out in short order while doing surveillance. They're the ones that come out to the front yard often, looking up and down the streets, always peeking out the front windows, and they have obvious security cameras that they're watching all the time. These are the people who will see the smoke billowing out of your car. They will see you pull up your camera and will notice that your car doesn't belong there. Now, there's not a lot that we can do about the nosy neighbors except be aware that they are there. Every neighborhood has one or two, and try to identify who they are so you can be careful when they're watching. A big cure for a lot of our surveillance errors is making sure you have proper tinting and window coverings to help keep you hidden inside your surveillance vehicle. I use black foam core cutouts I get from the hobby store and cut them out to fit my side windows. I combine that with a good, not too flashy sunscreen in my windshield and a black cloth hanging behind me on a clothing rod in my car to keep me blacked out and covert. I make sure these foam core cutouts have a hole in a corner or two so I can see out too, and leave a small side of my sunscreen open so I can shoot video out of those peepholes. Regardless of how well hidden you are inside of your surveillance vehicle, if you park too close to your subject's house, you will get burned many times. You have to keep in mind the target of your investigation is going to be more suspicious in most cases, especially in injury-related cases like workers' comp or slip and fall investigations. But cheating spouses or ex-spouses involved in a custody battle are going to be keeping an eye out too. And you are also more likely going to be noticed when you start to follow once your subject goes mobile, as you are in close proximity to them. In some circumstances, I always try to stay at least 3 to 4 houses away, or maybe even 2 to 3 blocks away. It's kind of a judgment call when you arrive based on all the intel that you have on your subject, how active the neighborhood is, and the type of neighborhood. This is closely tied to how closely you follow your subject once they do go mobile. Follow too close, you will get made. Follow too loose, you will lose them. It really is a matter of skill, art, and luck, and every case is different. When inside a residential neighborhood, I will follow a little further away, but once on a collector, arterial, or a main road, I will close the gap. On an open highway, I can pull back even more, but if it's in a city, you need to stay close in case they take a sudden exit. Also, don't make too many sudden lane changes while following. I've seen a lot of PIs that are constantly changing lanes, trying to keep eyes on the subject vehicle all the time, and then they wonder why they get burned so often. You need to drive it normally, or as normal as possible, and if a car gets between you and the subject, use the shadows and other things to keep an eye on their location. Pretexting is something that should be done sparingly too. In fact, I seldom do pretexting anymore unless it is absolutely necessary, and then I only do it once. This is a common ploy used by many PIs, and well, it's so common that most people being surveilled are quite aware of it too. Most people know their neighbors these days, or at least they know who is a neighbor and who is not, and most do not even answer the door to strangers. Pretext phone calls also seem to be very ineffective in this day and age too, as no one answers to an unknown number, and most people have a cell phone, so if they do answer, it doesn't mean they're home. This is one of those pet peeves of mine. So many national firms still want PIs to do pretexting. It tells me how out of date they are regarding effective surveillance techniques for today, and that they most likely never do any surveillance. A big mistake that often gets many PIs burned is arriving too late for surveillance. You need to be out, in most cases, before the sun comes up and before the neighborhood wakes up. Showing up at 7 a.m. during the week is usually too late, as everyone is up already, including those nosy neighbors. The kids are getting ready to leave for school. Parents are heading off to work, and they will notice you parking and setting up in broad daylight. I know sometimes your intel tells you the subject is not usually active early, but having that early cover of darkness when you set up goes a long ways in staying covert. When the subject does get up, you are all hunkered and ready for action and well hidden in your surveillance vehicle. One of the main ways PIs get burned on surveillance is while conducting foot surveillance. You need to pick and choose when you do foot surveillance carefully. When I first started, I followed my subject into convenience stores as well as shopping malls. And I got burned plenty of times in those smaller stores, as the subject may have seen me following them out of the neighborhood, not buying anything at the store, then behind them again when they continued on their travels. When they go into a small store, just be patient and wait for them to leave. Set up for a good follow and get what video you can when they leave. There are also many other essential surveillance skills you need to have to ensure a successful surveillance, and I made this video right here that covers those skills.